Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Good morning, Tommy.
Oh, good morning, Mike. How you doing?
It feels like you've got a lot of energy this morning going on. You were hyping when I was running the intro. Tommy was dancing in the background. Tommy usually doesn't dance in the background. This is some of you must have gotten up early today, or you're just excited.
I think I'm a little excited, Mike. And my mother-in-law has been in town, so I've been telling her, I'm like, listen, I know it seems like I don't sleep a lot. I know it seems like I'm going back and forth in the office, but you got to understand the mind here. The mind's always going. When I wake up, I'm ready to talk my wife's ear off before coffee about anything. I now planned ahead where I know she needs a cup of coffee, sit down for 2 minutes, and then we can engage. But from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, this mind is just running. And it sounds like that would be a lot, but I mean, 37 years, kind of normal for me now. So
it's working out. It's doing okay for you.
We'll see about 50 where we're at, but right now it's working. Yeah, I am excited though. I am excited.
Awesome. Today's topic is going to be talking about how can we get the maximum performance out of Power Query. So that we're going to go kind of deeper dive into Power Query. What things can we do inside the service? What are data flows Gen 2? What are some things that we can tune the performance around those things we do in Power Query? And potentially, what are things we can do in desktop even? Power Query lives in many different places. It's not just the service. It's actually in Power BI, Excel, and PowerBI.com. That being said, Tommy, do you have a beat from the street here before we get into our main topic?
You know what? I think I do actually. And I think this goes around a lot of the updates we've been talking about. Just all of our updates lately have just been off the blog because they've been the volume has been so significant about how many updates been coming out. Really, it almost feels like the last 6 months that it's just been fabric update. And I think that I've been finding a process for myself, but I wanted to open this up to you. What's the process? What's your take on learning and keeping on top of all these fabric updates? Not just reading it. Obviously, you can read the blog, but then doing that kind of, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to get really familiar with this. So what's your process or what's your methodology staying on top of this?
That's a great question. I would say, Tommy, my pattern is when a new feature comes out or something has been released, I try and put a project, at least for me internally, around whatever that new thing is. So that way I get some runtime on that feature, build something with it, or take an existing. I have a number of processes that I run internally for my business already. So I have API calls. I've got things I need to go use and store data from. So I'm constantly trying to figure out internally, like, okay, here's a new feature. Like, let's take one, for example, materialized views, right? There's a new thing there, right? I have existing processes that have notebooks that run one after another, multiple tables being generated. I thought, what if I took that existing process and just left the original process alone, made a new workspace, and kind of just copied down what I knew was working? So that's something I do kind of fairly frequently. I'm constantly pushing on new projects just to make sure I understand the scope of what it can do. And that way, when it goes GA, if we have a customer who needs it, we can say we've already done a project around it. We have some knowledge around this. We know what it can and cannot do. Another one that we're working very heavily with customers right now is direct lake features, right? Having a semantic model that connects back to one lake or the lake houses and testing that out. What does that look like? Because it's new. It could potentially provide a lot of great impact to businesses, but we need to understand how it all works. What are the caveats? What is smooth? What is not smooth? And that way we can kind of negotiate around what features we should add or not add. So that's kind of how I do it.
Yeah. No, and mine's actually really similar because obviously we don't live in the age right now where a single feature comes out and there's 5 blog articles about that feature. It's just the volume's too ferocious right now for that. Where eventually there's some articles from the other MVPs, but usually it's the pace is so fast. So I'm the same. I have 3, we'll call them personal projects. That's not going to affect the client. And honestly, I'm trying not to affect my business so much either, but things that are important to me, things that are related, and they all cover different ones. API, some are coming from a database, and I have a lot of scenarios for those already. So the same thing, I try to plug and play that. Like when the database came out, for example, I'm like, okay, what scenarios would I need the database for that are efficient? Well, probably a Power App, right? Or something in that capacity to extend outside. Then you're testing that out. And I always like to have the documentation up look at the limitations just to see what's capable there. Because for me, I need to get to that point. I call it the kung fu point of learning, and that I'm taking that from the Keanu Reeves in The Matrix when he gets plugged in and he's like,
Yeah.
he's like, I know kung fu, and honestly, there's that immersion that has to happen with these projects, and it's hard because, Mike, look at April's Fabric update. We've talked about this before. 60, if you printed it out, you're printing 65 pages of update.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you're also focusing too, Mike, on, I'm assuming that you don't have a project for all 65 pages. You're focusing on
No.
that you honestly have to take some critical thinking that are going to be the most impactful for clients in the future.
Yeah, I would say a lot of the stuff around direct lakes, semantic models, data engineering exercises, copy job, it's all the stuff that's very heavily data engineering. I'm less inclined to do work around the real-time analytics just because they're from a client standpoint, there's less businesses that need real-time analytics. There's definitely ones out there that have it. One of the things I heard someone say at a Microsoft conference that I thought was very relevant, they said, your business runs like on demand. It's all event driven, right? So if you run a coffee shop, someone shows up at the front door, you're not sitting there and saying, okay, every 15 minutes I'll take an order for coffee, right? As the order comes in immediately, once the order is there, then you say, okay, order's here. Now I do something. Now I'm going to make the order on demand when that happens. So while I understand that capability, I don't think our data warehouse or our lake houses run exactly in the same manner all the time. I do think there's event-driven things, right? I'm doing some data loading in Databricks. When that is complete, I don't want to wait to start loading the last little bit of data into Fabric from Databricks, whatever that may be, right? So I do want things to be event-driven, but I don't necessarily want them to be real-time analytics where I'm constantly adding things all the time.
Yes.
So I want event-driven things, but I don't necessarily want changes all the time. So that's kind of what I'm trying to balance a lot of times for clients. So that's usually where I'm spending a lot of effort between those two balances. And now that I do a lot of software, right? So a lot of my day is trying to figure out what's the surface area between like the apps that I develop. I'm doing a lot of embedding right now. So everything's embedded. So trying to figure out what do clients need there? What are the feature requests? How do we supporting our existing clients as well as getting new ones in the door for our embedded experiences, and then also Power Designer, right? What do we build there? What is the right experience for building software? So I do a lot of that as well, but I'm always trying to figure out what new features is Microsoft coming up with that I could use to build products or tools around the periphery of what they're not going to support or not going to build long term.
That's a great point too. You almost have like a mental Eisenhower matrix in your head where there's a difference between useful and critical, right? And I think that's a big thing that I have to go through these updates. The real-time stuff for most clients, yeah, it's very useful. But if I'm an IT security, that's critical, right? Because I would like to know now if there's a breach. But for a lot of my clients, it'd be nice, but that's the cost we talked about. So yeah, it's a lot of vetting and probably choosing, like, obviously the updates come out. I don't say there's a number on how many I pick to actually kind of learn or kind of go into. It really depends on what comes out, but taking that time. And I think that's so important where we're at right now in the stage of Fabric, the era of Fabric.
I'll give you one more on that little note there on like, what do you pick to learn, right? There's a lot of things in Fabric that are a little of like friction points, I would say, things that are like difficult to do. And one of those difficult to do's is, sequencing multiple notebooks together side by side, right? So I like to look at what features Microsoft comes out with that are going to be where I see them removing my pain points. Any features that are coming out that are going to make things easier for me or more automated or more linked together. Like if I have areas in the tool that are friction filled and Microsoft is developing a new feature that I see potentially addresses that friction, those are the ones I prioritize over other things. Like, again, I'm going back to like real-time analytics, nice to have, great, cool. But like materialized views, I think that's going to change how people build things day to day. I see it as something I would want to use to simplify how I build notebooks and SQL statements to load data through bronze through gold. I also see like things in copy job. I see improvements in data in the data pipelines. There's a lot of things there that I think are fixing problems that I have had with the prior systems. And so those are the ones that I'm like, that's I should learn that. That's something I need to understand. Is this something that's going to be useful enough? And for some things, they're so useful that even if they're in preview, I got to use this. It's just so much better. This is so much better of an experience than
Worth
before.
the risk. Yeah.
It's worth the risk.
You're going to like this. This is going to be really quick, but with all the AI stuff too to learn, I just read an excellent article about where we're at with AI, and the title of the article was "We're now in the conductors era." A lot of the tooling now, you're not necessarily the trumpet player or the instrument, especially with all these agents. You're not building, you're delegating. And I think we're seeing a little of that with Fabric, but with all this AI stuff, we have to consider ourselves almost as a conductor now, rather than the bit player in it where we're building. I mean, Mike, I already seen this with VS Code and the agents. You can do a lot of building of a Fabric semantic model and not write anything. All you have to write is a really good prompt, and it can take care of it for you. So
yeah, I do think so.
So I love this idea that what we're calling the conductor. So
yeah, that's a trend that I'm seeing. Also, there's also this experience that I'm seeing here where N8N.io is this program. It's basically, it allows you to sequence a prompt, and then the prompt can then do different actions. It's really interesting to me what's going on here in this whole AI space. So you may not just need one model. You may need 3 or 4 or 5 different models, and each model is kind of a little bit better at certain things than others. And so I'm seeing people now ask a prompt, hey, send an email to so-and-so and do these things. And what happens is you submit the prompt through Slack. Slack then interprets the prompt, and then it goes through and says, oh, well, you're writing emails best done through Sonnet. So it runs the prompt through Sonnet, and then it then uses the automation. It hooks into Gmail and does all the things and writes through the email and then logs the information for you. There's something coming here where you need to orchestrate multiple things together. And one of the things that's interesting to me is Microsoft is really doubling down on this Copilot experience, but there's multiple models that I may need to do different things or write code. So there's got to be something there in the future where, we can start picking, Copilot is maybe the main horsepower that's run here. But like, if I look at, Cursor and other programs, you can pick which model you want to use when it's running the AI. I think that's something that I'd like to see somewhere else in Fabric as well. So I can kind of cater, or I can use other tooling here that could really automate things, but then use multiple models together to do things. This is really interesting to me where this is going.
We're at a phenomenal stage. This is fun.
Okay. Anyways, that being said, we're on to our main topic for today. Oh,
what is
hear that, Tommy? We have another caller today. We have a call in today. I'll bring in our caller. I'd like to welcome everyone to the podcast. There he is. Welcome to the show. This is Alex Powers, the one, the only Alex Powers, joining us today on our call.
My gosh, thank you so much. Excited to be here for the Explicit Measures podcast. Great to see you, Tommy. Great to see you, Mike. And I'm excited to talk a little bit about Power Query and all of its various flavors and stages and hosts, if you don't mind.
We want to get into this one. This has been long on our Alex and I have been talking this forever, but like, this is like a dream come true. I'm like, Alex, you'd be perfect for the podcast. The things how you interact. I'm super excited about this one. So this is going to be fun today.
By the way, we don't have a lot of guests usually, but it's nice to join on the Explicit Measure podcast. Mike has a nice ring to it. Nice little ring kind of thing. Yeah. So it sounds like we're actually something. So
yes, exactly right. Let's jump in. So some items today. So let's talk about max performance inside Power Query. Let's unpack a little bit more of this. Like, how do we wring the most out of our investment in our time and our effort here? And let me just give a little context. And Tommy, maybe you could add some more here in a bit. When we think about Power Query, I mean, we have 30 million monthly active users from the Power BI side of things. I think that was recently announced in one of the Microsoft Q1 or one of the Q calls early this year. There's a huge number of people that are probably using some form of Power Query at some level. So there's a lot of best practices that come out here. I mean, Alex dreams an M at this point. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's how it works. You see the matrix. It's now in front of you. So maybe let's just start there. Like, what are maybe some good patterns that we see happening here across either desktop or the service? And maybe there are different patterns I should be thinking about for desktop versus service. So let me kick it over to you, Alex. Maybe just give us a couple maybe key nuggets here, and we'll react to those and unpack from there.
Yes. Well, let's first start with going very far back in time to Power Query hosted in Excel.
Oh yes.
And this is where it all began, right?
Yes.
So I always think back of like my early days of Power Query, where it's like a lot of spaghetti M, and I've got multiple tables kind of going on the left-hand rail, and at the very end is like a business analyst sitting in my cube. I just hit refresh, and if it takes 20, 30 minutes on my local machine, that's way better than doing it manually, right? So like
100%.
I'm willing to accept of like, oh, this is bad, but it's okay because it's my bad and it's helping me be better. Like, this is amazing. But then when you offload to like Power BI, it's like, well, now it's the cloud that you're dealing with. Is it part of your subscription, $14 USD now, or is it part of like your premium capacity? It's like that spend. Along the way, though, like between Excel and Power BI, of course, we have Power Query hosted in Azure Analysis Services. We have Power Query hosted in Power Apps. We have Power Query hosted in Microsoft Teams. There's Power Query hosted in Quick Create up in the service. Like if you have a little block of tabular data and you copy and paste it in there, you're running Power Query unbeknownst to you. And then, of course, with like this latest generation of Power Query with Data Flows Gen 2, like, oh my gosh, there's amazing horsepower behind the scenes. But the part that I really wanted to come on explicit measures for is like the global or universal reach that you guys have. I actually came here to brainwash everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Wow,
Okay.
first off, really overestimating there that reach. So really.
Let me turn on my spinning wheel here. You're getting sleepy. You're getting sleepy.
Like when I snap my fingers, like, all right, we all forgot everything about Power Query.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I'm willing to jump on this little story here
because that's the beauty of it, right? Is the UI looks and feels the exact same. Some of the 1980s UI versus like the modern Power Query Online experience. But for the most part, exact same tabs, exact same points and clicks, right click, left click menus, whatever it may be.
Yep.
That's the beauty of it. Now, the downfall of that is like the behind the scenes engine. Like, well, hold on. The thing that I used to do in spaghetti code down in Excel is now taking me 6 hours up in the service.
Yeah.
Where's the difference here? The difference is obviously the VMs and the cloud hosting that has to kind of do all this execution. And then especially with Data Flows Gen 2 now, like, you have a lake house and you have a warehouse, and then ideally you have a data destination output.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanna forget everything that we know about data flows as they exist today.
Done.
Thank you.
I'm willing to follow this this story here.
Thank you, Tommy.
Right.
Because in my mind, like data flows are a confusing topic. Gen 1, it was your ETL logic. And at the very end, it became a consumable item that you go, well, just connect your Power BI to your data flow. You're like, well, wait, I thought my data flow was ETL expressions and logic. Well, it's kind of both things.
Yes.
Well, you can also do direct query against it. And you're like, oh, so it's a database now. And you're like, oh, this is even stranger. People who didn't have databases that kind of treated data flows as if they were a database.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All that a lot. They also treated data flows as kind of the security separation, where they would be like, well, I'll create one table and one data flow, and that's what I'll share with users in a single workspace, and I'll do link tables across things. So then you would always see the ideas boards of like, well, how do I get object level access so I can only give them tables A, B, and D, and then skip C? And it's like, all right, so now you want security support too. It doesn't do that thing. It doesn't do this other thing very well. So I think with Data Flows Gen 2, it's now the ability to like reset expectations across the board. It is
I like
treating it just like ELT. I didn't say ETL.
ELT, extract, load, transform. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is
okay.
Only ELT.
See, I don't know if I agree with that, actually.
I don't know about it.
You will at the end of this podcast. This is why we came.
Oh, there's a. Me and Mike love a good bet, so
yeah. So
let's go.
The difficulty here now is that you've built up all of this estate of Power Query, and ideally you want to try Fabric. So this is your first run experience, and you'd want to do the minimal amount of work to try directly, to try these other things.
Yes.
So copy and paste your Power Query code, and then you get a big CU bill, and you go, "What the heck happened?"
Yes, this is exactly what happens. Yep. And I would also argue, I think most business users that are coming from the Power BI realm, the first thing they go into Fabric, like, okay, great, data flow is Gen 2. I already know data flow stuff. The UI is exactly the same. Oh, cool. I have a right location. I can stick the data where it needs to go. And they immediately just kind of like without changing any of the settings, the bells, like there's other things here I want to kind of just unpack as well. Like there's this whole like staging data area that comes with the data flow. Like, so again, this is where it gets a little gray for me and like my understanding. Like, I know that that's going to, every time you add something more to a process, it's going to cost you more CUs. Like, but I believe staging data is on by default still. And so because it's on by default, it's always using a little bit of CU to run that staging piece, whatever that may be. And so I'm looking at this going, well, do we really need that? Is that something do we have to have that there? Or is that something where, again, to your point, Alex, as you get better with these things, you'll say, oh, well, actually, I probably don't need staging. I'm not dealing with a bunch of small, tiny files. I don't really need that. So if I turn that off, that should save me some CUs, but I don't know. Again, I haven't done the testing myself. What percentage of CUs am I going after? But now we're not dealing with small files, and it was faster with small files, and now it's not. And so then there's like the copy job stuff that's also happening there too. So massive top files that are really big. Power Query is smart enough to offload it to other processes that are faster, that do those large copy job things for you, but it's still acting like Power Query. So there's a lot of what I would say mysteriousness that's happening with it right now. And I don't really feel like I have always a clear vision or picture around it. When I compare it, and this is where I think a lot of my rub is when I talk about Power Query against other things, is there are notebooks and then there's Power Query. And Power Query is competing against like Talend or other visual editing programs that are out there. But I see it has a new competitor. Microsoft is competing with internal to itself with other parts of the product. And this is where, Tommy and I have been very like aggressive and like, is it really the right thing to do with Power Query? I mean, I love the experience of it. Yeah. But there's a lot of friction points that I see right now that just need to be maybe more visible to the end user or ability to tune things better. And again, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail you, Alex, on some of your pieces here. But one thing in my mind here is there's a lot of work coming out of the notebooks team around, is this a read-heavy operation or is this a write-heavy operation? And it changes how your delta tables are made. Are they V-ordered or are they not V-ordered? And so my understanding is every time a data flow, we have an assumption that every data flow may be touching a Power BI semantic model, so everything that comes out of data flows is already V-ordered. Well, in my understanding, if I'm going after a read-heavy workload and I'm just reading the data and I don't need to go into semantic models, maybe data flows should drop the whole V-ordering when I need to, or let me decide when I'm writing the data down as a V-order or not. And that saved me some CU. So I'm always looking I love the experience of it, but I want to get it more tuned down to like, hey, this is something that everyone should be able to be using. Yes, it's slightly more than a notebook because you're not writing straight code all the time. Fine. Like that's okay, right? But don't make it egregiously high, or at least give me the controls that turn off the things I don't think I need to get it down to a more economical state.
God. Well, I love all these points, but Tommy, you were going to interject, so please go ahead, sir.
So 2 quick points. You're firing this up, man. And I mean, it's not hard to do, but no, but I think there's 2 kind of big things. So I'm saying I forgot everything with data flows, and yet you mentioned all the different iterations of data flows, which are in Power Apps, Power Automate, all these different things. And now we're saying with the Gen 2, it's not ETL, it's ELT. My first thought's like, well, then call this something else, because if every single iteration I have followed the same process, but that doesn't work as well with Gen 2. First thought. Second thought, and this is going to be super quick, and this is really, I think, part of talking about the enhancing this. Mike has heard this a ton, but I have the philosophy of Steve Jobs. If you're going to introduce a product, feature, or service, and it has other things related, it has to do something better than the other products that are there, or has no reason to exist. Steve Jobs said this when the iPad came out. If we're going to have a bigger phone, it has to be better at browsing the web or watching a movie, or else we shouldn't make it. And I think for us, where we've talked about this, is I love the UI. I have been such a data flow guy, and there has been that frustration with Gen 2. So I think with what can we do to show that value where, hey, Power, the data flows Gen 2, it does this X, Y, and Z so much better than the other in a sense, internal competing like services or features.
My gosh, I'm just like deep in thought over here because I feel like I gave you all the answers to the test. So first one, I want to go back to like Mike's point here. So V order optimization. For those who aren't aware, the Vertipack algorithm and compression, it's applied to the Parquet files. So whenever you're writing things out, we're going to apply the same amazing V order scanning that occurs today in Power BI to those binaries. The thing here is in other applications, you can control on or off. With data flows, you cannot.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not until this episode airs and the Power Query team gets a hold of this.
And for us?
Everyone in the universe is gonna go out and vote on ideas.fabric, and they're gonna, say, allow me to disable. I'm also of that opinion, Mike. But the part I need to challenge both you and myself on is it a low-code tool? Like, at what point have we added so many customizations, configurations that you as a Power Query M point-and-click user need to go out and understand, like, well, what does parallelization mean? What does disabling viewer optimization mean? Like, at a certain point, I feel like your level of depth is very far past maybe the original persona. Now, it's great as a power user that I could have that capability, or should it just be intelligently discovered at runtime by the execution engine?
Well, I mean, let's also unpack this a bit of time. I mean, usually your first run of data flows doesn't really tell you anything much about how much CU it uses. To be honest, like and then honestly, there's Microsoft already knows the lineage of all my tables wherever they may be, right? So if that data flow is running and that there's no linkages between a semantic model and that data flow, or that table that comes out of the data flow, Microsoft already has a lineage view of this. That knows where these tables are coming from. So again, to your point, Alex, right? Maybe Microsoft, after the first two runs, it should automatically know, hey, this is not being used in a semantic model. I'm going to immediately turn this down and not actually have it do a V order anymore. Because again, I think you can technically change whether or not it's V ordering or not V ordering, because it's just another series of tables that are being rebuilt. That doesn't change. It doesn't change how it reads the files. All that does is changes how the impact of how fast that it runs, right?
Yep.
These are things, to your point, if we're talking about the front end UI of things, again, it's a fine line. Right? There's the idea of build it so it works. And then there's the second step that is tune it so it's more efficient. Yep. Right? So there's an optimization. So a lot of times I feel like a lot of the Power Query is just, I need to get people's brains around what do they need to do to shape the data. And then once we understand the shape of the data, we'll use that to build other things that are potentially more efficient or better use of time or more reliable. But there are also a couple things in Power Query that are just extremely, in my opinion, extremely difficult to get around. Paging through data using an API in Power Query, difficult, right? Right. And there's just general getting a token and using said token in an API. It's getting better, but it's still not as easy as it is in other experiences. So there are a couple of areas that I think are just very friction filled that maybe the Power Query team will get themselves around. But for me, I'm looking at it going like, it's taking away some of the glimmer of it in comparison to everything that we get now.
I'm willing to forgive data flows though with that, Mike, because again, it shouldn't do everything better than everything else. Like the API thing, frustrating, sure, but I think the glowing reviews that I've always loved data flows. And again, to this day, I remember when data flows came out, Gen 1, because I was so upset because I had my first daughter and I couldn't use it because I was on paternal leave. I was like, oh no, kind of thing. And I
missed it.
2017, I can tell you, was January. So, but I think the thing is, yeah, I can't do some of those advanced features, but the UI, I mean, what other tool do you have out there where I can just start going and I don't have to know another coding language? The big thing with Power Query has always been 90% of what you can do with the user interface, and that's, I mean, what a pitch, and they're really great features. And I think, yes, I'm willing to forgive the API thing being advanced. I need 18 parameters and I need to make sure it plugs in here, but I can't make it dynamic because it won't work with data flows. Fine. The UI by itself is such a good feature, and it's always worked really efficiently, even with Gen 1, that it may not be able to do the advanced things, but that pitch of the user interface and being very efficient with that has always been its calling card.
So the API example, that's a moment in time example with artificial intelligence, right? Like you just have GPT generate you some code.
Well, I'm using more often than not when I write things in M or getting things trying to build stuff out in Power Query. I'm actually opening up Copilot in my Copilot in my browser, and the regular Copilot in my Edge browser, and I'm asking, hey, here's the error I've received. Here's the M code that I had. Can you please help me rewrite it? Believe it or not, the Copilot is actually getting pretty dang good at debugging my M code straight up, just using it. So like, yes. Talking to, again, these are one of these things where I'm like, the pattern exists. People are going to try to do it. And I'll concede this one. Getting to files inside SharePoint, I still think Dataflow's Gen 2 or Dataflows in general is just by far the best tool to go find files in SharePoint. It's just the easiest thing to get access to. I've tried to do it without it, and it's like a pain in the butt to get anywhere close to SharePoint with files. Lists, maybe not as much of a big deal because it's a little bit easier now, but like that is egregious anywhere else. So it is by far the best tool there for accessing my Excel files and paging through them.
Cool. All right. So we've talked about the beauty of the UI with Tommy.
Yeah.
So let's start talking about the behind the scenes now. Gen 2, right?
Gen 2, yes.
You had talked about staging. You're like, oh, that's on by default. But it is also turns off by default. So if you're going to small files, it will say, I am going to turn this off for you with a yellow banner. Just due to the volume, kind of the scans that it may do kind of against those file sources.
Yes.
If you're writing to a data warehouse, it is required to have staging.
Really?
Big yellow explicit banner that says, I'm sorry, because you're writing to a warehouse, staging is required. In the past, when it was first released, it was trying to do single row inserts as opposed to like bulk. So you would sit there and stare at it forever. I was like, all right, we got to make this thing required. You can't do cross workspace operations with the warehouse, so it has to be in the same workspace as the data flow to the destination. And then, of course, like all these other things that are now released, like writing to SQL database in Fabric, SQL databases in Fabric. I think that's the official marketing term. Or writing to like Azure SQL database, like blazing fast. Like always, if you're just streaming it to a very simple destination like that. Now, when it comes to staging, we will take the data, we will write it into the lakehouse. So just like any other ELT pattern, ELTL, if we're really doing like the full acronym here, but you want to load your data into the destination first, and then you want to start doing transforms on top of it.
Yes.
So we will write that view order optimization to that behind the scenes lake, as Mike kind of talked about. It's like, well, why do I need this? Like, I'm only using this in the context of my ELT pattern. Yeah, I would agree. We should have that off by default for view order optimization. So everyone here listening on Explicit Measures podcast, go out to ideas.fabric. Let's vote this thing up. Let's kind of have this as a nice little requirement. From there, though, now you get the SQL Analytics endpoint that you can then start doing transformations on top of. And you also have the query insights from the Dataflow staging warehouse. So if you want to go and see the M execution that's occurring, go out to query insights. What occurs with SQL in Power Query? Query folding.
Yes.
And now it becomes more of like the Star Wars of like, close your eyes and hope that you don't break the query folding. Like that's really what's occurring. So as you move into this ELT pattern, everything you're doing on the points and clicks, Tommy, is did I break the fold or did I not break the fold? Because if you did break the fold, we're going to offload to the Mashup engine now. So there's multiple things going on here in the tail. But ideally with like a clean warehouse, everything folds, get me to my final destination, this thing can be blazing fast. I think in one of my examples, I've got like 373 million rows being written out in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So it can do things at scale. Yeah. But the path is very narrow if you want to treat it like an ETL tool.
This is interesting to me because I was just mucking around the other day inside the service, and there's this whole I don't know, I can't remember exactly how I got into it, but you have is it a SQL data warehouse or a SQL database? I can't remember. I think it's SQL data warehouse, and you can now build visual queries inside the SQL. Okay, is that okay?
We talked about it for the longest time. Yeah, that's the power part. Yeah.
So it's weird. It's weird though. I can't quite figure it out. So I'm in a SQL data warehouse, I think, and then I'm going to do a visual query, and it appears as though I get a limited amount of operations that are all foldable. They're all folding back to SQL. And then I can click a button that says, push this over to Power Query. And what I was expecting was like a SQL statement at the beginning that said, oh, here's your SQL statement of like the visual query building. And then, oh, by the way, we'll pick it up from there and then do whatever you want to do with the M code. But I was very shocked when I moved from the visual query into Power Query. It just wrote the M code for me. I was like, okay, that does make sense because these are the same operations. But I was very confused on how to explain it to my customers. Is like, in the visual query space, am I writing M or am I writing SQL or am I writing M that is only foldable SQL in that experience?
Like, you can also create a view that writes SQL. So that's the other option there.
So the visual query designer, the last button on there is a big rectangle. Did you click that?
Yeah, that thing maybe to take you over to the Power Query experience.
It won't take you over, but it will take you from the limited navigation bar to the actual full-blown Power Query.
Yeah, correct.
And then as long as you maintain folding, you can then save that visual query back. But that is such a weird experience. I don't know why anyone would use it outside of I have a low-code user in a data warehouse and they don't know SQL. And I'm like, well, why are they editing if they don't know SQL? And that isn't like a gatekeeping thing, but that's my own general curiosity.
Well, let me... Great curiosity in this one. I think there's a strategy around. So again, let's think about the story or the use case of that 30 million users that have been kind of conditioned to say, look, it's Power Query, it's tables, it's views of data. I can see the things physically there. I got to be honest. If we look at the scale or the scope of like, okay, we have people who build reports. We have people that are like maybe medium level experts. They're starting to get towards data engineering, that they're not there yet. They're doing a bit more. And then there's like the advanced users, right? So I would put this in like, this is part of the growth pattern that I see for people coming from Power Query and Power BI, moving more towards a Fabric experience. So it still needs to be kind of graphic in nature. I feel like this is going to sound like a swear word, Tommy, and feel free to tell me I'm wrong here, but it feels like access for Fabric. That acts as like it's that visual query building. And I really do firmly believe, like when I learned SQL, that was my first interaction, was using Access, grabbing a couple tables, building a relationship or two. Like that made sense to me mechanically in my head. I could visualize it, and then I could just flip over and see like the SQL behind the scenes, like, oh, that's what it's doing. So there's something to say for like learning code by having some graphical something on front of it. And then behind it, you're actually generating real code that you can kind of jump into and out of and see it. And you can't, I mean, this is the same experience I really like with like learning Python using Data Wrangler. Like it's the same kind of vibe to me when I'm able to jump back and forth between a UI and then the actual code experience. So I think it serves a purpose. And as we try to bring more of those 30 million users over to us in the Fabric realm, I think this is going to be a useful teaching, training, education tool that's going to help them become more capable in that space. So that's kind of where I see it fitting right now.
Yeah, let me touch that, and I'll hand it over to Alex because I want to touch on that's such a good point, Mike. And I think this is so pivotal to where we're at with data flows, and I think just Fabric in general. That 30 million users. Well, not all of them are people who are like, what's Power BI? Oh, look at user interface. A lot of MVPs, a lot of enterprise use data flows. Mike and I have had this conversation since Fabric's come out about the overlap of skill between Power Query and Python users. And initially I'm like, no, people if you're an advanced Power BI person, you shouldn't learn Python, or this shouldn't be a requirement. I've shifted with that. I've shifted Mike can be very persuasive, and so can the products. So, but I think the biggest thing here is what I'm hearing, and this is kind of what I want to pose to you, Alex, and tell me if I'm wrong, but tell me the path forward here. What I'm hearing is data flows Gen 2, immensely powerful. We have all the features available with a nice user interface. However, the path to the most efficient way is very narrow. There's some things you don't want to touch and you need to be aware of. Yet that's not visible or manifested to the user initially with this nice, pretty, easy user interface. Am I far off from where we're at? What can we do, even if I'm an advanced user or just a normal user, to use data flows, but make sure I'm using it in a way that's the most efficient?
Yeah, so there's multiple things you said in there, and I want to kind of hit home on. One was like the narrow path to success, which I think is wrong to look at it that way. Because you can still get to the end of a very successful refresh it may just be a long running tail that costs you a lot of CUs. So when we talk about efficiency, we're really talking about like a high level of skill set of that individual who's building it. So now you're like, am I staffing my team with someone who is highly skilled in data flows to maximize the CUs? Or is the skill set better spent learning Python, learning SQL, learning these other things? The other half here was like the MVP thing. And like a very interesting hypothesis that I have right now is that like a lot of people had to use Power Query, but they didn't lose their SQL skill set. They didn't lose their Python skill set. It's just they didn't have a place to meaningfully use it. Now with Fabric, it's like, well, here you go. Here's a tool of your choice or a language of your choice. You're like, oh, amazing. I'm just going to go use that because that's what I'm really most comfortable in. I just had to use the thing that, was the path to get into Power BI semantic model or kind of using the data flows Gen 1. I think that that's what we're seeing is that a lot of people had these skill sets and they now are finally unlocked. The other path, though, is like every kid in high school and college is learning Python. And even that, like, we're like, I don't know, is there an investment that's worth the time with AI and GPT, or is it going to be vibe coding like your way to the solution? And that's interesting.
Yeah.
And the marketing terminology here that I'll like challenge everyone with is like, I don't hear anyone say low code, no code anymore.
No,
Interesting.
it's gone.
AI.
Yeah, I would agree. That term has almost 100% dropped off the radar.
Yeah.
I would agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
And I will. So me personally, right? I've been really experimenting heavily with AIs to help me vibe code things. This is something that's really been very interesting to me. And there's a couple like when you apply AI to various things, like you started asking ChatGPT some questions around things, and like those first initial questions, your first interactions with ChatGPT, like how good it was to answer the questions. So an example I'll throw out here. I was just having an electrical issue in my house. I was replacing some outlets. I didn't know how the wiring was supposed to be. I literally was taking pictures of the problem, describing it and writing it out in text form, drawing a diagram and giving the image to ChatGPT, which consumed all the information, rewrote the answer, and then responded back with like the correct answer on how to rewire things so it was correct. And then I had to like verify on the internet and like, is this right? So I didn't even really know what terms to look for, but it was just simple things. It was just, adding some switches in and fixing some things there that didn't feel like it was working right. But the reason I bring this up is because I have spent probably in the past 2 weeks, I probably have built about 3 or 4 websites, just full websites. And that is something that's been very new to me. And I was able to vibe code these website things. So, I mean, websites aren't the easiest thing, but they're also not the most difficult thing either. And I'm thinking to myself, again, I'm trying to unpack this. Like, what does this mean for me as my skill set? What does this mean for my kids who are going to start learning computers, that are starting to get into this step? They're using ChatGPT now, and I've taught them a little bit about it. And now they're, my son was working at a restaurant, and he's like, I'm done. I need to move on. And he goes, I went over to ChatGPT. I told it what I wanted to do. It gave me a form. I added some things in there. It's going to physically change how we do everything. And it's not going to be low code, no code. It's going to be AI code or vibe code or full code. I agree with that statement.
But I think the UI is still helpful here to get solutions. So I'm with Tommy of like the pointing and clicking is amazing, but that also allows the transfer of that logic to different languages, to different systems very easily. So like start out in Power Query, quickly transform it into Python, have Python turn in some Power Query. Like the transfer between services to skill sets could be very interesting as we kind of move forward. Tommy,
I think that's something there that I think is underutilized. I would really like to be inside the Power Query experience, build what I want to build there, go back to Copilot in Power Query and say, turn this Power Query steps into a Python function. Like that's what I wanted to do. And then go to my notebook and then run it. Like that would be amazing.
Mike, Alex, I know you're Microsoft, so I have to use the C word here, but to your point, Mike, I've used Cursor to do that. And I know that's not the greatest tool for Microsoft, but dude, it's I had the same thing. I had this data flow, it would run. I'm like, well, I guess I should go on a bike ride to St. Louis and back. And I basically told it I had an agent run, and we turned it into a Python notebook. So yeah, there's a point there with the user interface, and you might have been touching on this, Alex, but the user interface is so simple where it's almost deceiving, right? Where in the same fashion, they don't make airplane pilots or like the dashboard easy to look at because it's kind of meant to be complicated. You don't want it to be too easy to use. So like, oh, I can fly this plane. There's a lot of things that you can do in data flows. But again, I think, we were touching on this before the AI thing, but again, let's talk about that path, right? You disagree that it's a narrow path to efficiency.
Yes.
So let's expand on that.
So let's start with our actual source.
Okay. Oh.
So if I have a foldable source or a non-foldable source, if I have a foldable source and I just need to move it from point A to point B, is it a data flow that I need? Could I also use a copy job? Could I throw it as a copy activity into a data pipeline? Multiple different places, right? Yeah. So this is like the fabric issue of like 100 different ways to do something. It's up to you to decide like what is the best path for you. So data flows can copy data at volume and scale using the fast copy, which is the data pipeline copy activity underneath the hood of Power Query, made simple so you don't have to go learn a Python.
Yep.
From there, like if it's a non-foldable source like a file in a SharePoint, probably way easier to ingest using Power Query.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Excel files, is it worth building a full-blown notebook or like a full-blown data pipeline? Or is it way easier to just connect to that data and then write it using data flows? I'd probably say way easier with data flows.
I'd agree there. I think there's a pairing between like the Excel world and the Power Query world, because that's kind of where it was like born and grew up together. Like the friction there is so little. It's much better there. I mean, I've done a couple, read a Excel file inside Python, and then you need some libraries, and you got to kind of know how to do it right. And there's not like an easy button there that kind of gives you like the pieces of code that you would need.
Yep.
Power Query by far is easier there to kind of get after that data.
I think I had a light bulb, Alex. Continue, because I think I know where you're going with this, but I'm gonna let you drive.
When you start evaluating, like at the very beginning of like, is this the most efficient method? It could be the easiest method, but like efficiency is like a very different thing that we're like evaluating here now, right? So Power Query can absolutely do fast copy if it's a foldable source. Like go out and look at a list: Azure SQL, Snowflake, I think Oracle, Teradata, and a few others. Simple UI, point A to point B. Everything is folding because there's a SQL engine. For the non-foldable, I think people call them like slower sources, quote unquote. It may be simpler to just use Power Query for the initial data transfer from point A to point B, and then doing a query reference to data that now resides in the lake, and then throwing the warehouse on top of it for the actual transforms. So you're now having your query with query references. So in the old days, I think it was an enhanced compute engine, right? That we kind of use this with. All in one data flow, or you could break it out into multiple if you're kind of doing like the medallion architecture. Where you're saying this data flow's purpose is only to move data from point A to point B. I want it done as quickly as possible, so that way I can release the massive containers, and then that way I have more flexibility downstream for the next item in line. Other things that I kind of look at here, Tommy, is also like the update methods. So as I'm writing data to the source, do these tables, are they just quick drops and recreates?
Oh, yeah.
Or is it going to be a long-running operation like an append where I have to add new data? I need to do some type of incremental refresh to kind of look at some logic, whatever else it may be. I then start looking at my data flows of saying, this set of data flows I'm going to drop and reload. This other data flow has maybe one or two tables in it that are purely append operations. I'm no longer having all of my logic all in the same data flow.
Okay.
I like that.
Because in Power BI semantic models, what we have to do, we had to put every table in there, right?
Yep, correct.
Break free that mindset.
I like that one a lot.
Yeah. So there could be scenarios where you're like, well, I've got 10 tables, 8 of them are copying, the last 2 are transformations, right? At that point, you say, well, maybe because the source is supported with copy job, it's still a UI. It's still point and click. I'm going to offload all of these simple to a copy job, which unfortunately you can't run into data pipeline just yet. So stay tuned there.
It's been announced, but it hasn't shown up yet.
Yes. So from there, you're saying, well, these activities, I'm still going to use a low-code, no-code interface of a copy job, but these other ones, I'm going to land them in the lake. I'm going to connect to them with data flows. Then I'll do the final transforms. Maybe it's a merge, maybe it's an append, whatever it could be. And then you're going to get them to their final destination. You're starting to sprawl things out a little bit. I don't, like to use the sprawl word, but you're having the copy job to do the most efficient operation, the moving data from A to B, or you're having the data flow just doing the most efficient operation for data transformations. Tommy, go ahead.
I'm going to try to repeat what you said and my interpretation of it, or what exit ramp you're taking us to take here. Really, the initial, again, the principle with the methodology, really with data flows and Power Query in the past is you can do it all here. You can do it all in one. Yes, we had the ETL with Gen 1, but it was all data flows.
Yep.
But what I'm hearing is because of Fabric, because of the architecture, we should not be thinking that way anymore, where it's only, hey, this project is only data flows here. It's intended to be broken up where, you know what, we're going to copy here. We're going to do some quick transformations that I can do in a data flow here. I'm going to bring that to a notebook here. And that's really the most efficient way. Am I hearing from you that really data flows in general, or maybe all the products in general, are not intended to be siloed in a sense where data flows do some things much better, but it's intended to be part of a longer pipeline, so to speak, the conceptual pipeline?
So I think you're going to see more things are going to be added to the data flows. So like right now they have the fast copy, which is, I don't know how to build a data pipeline, but I can do high speed retrieval at scale. So going after these 30 million plus developers, right? Of like, do they need to know how to build a pipeline? No, we have it here. They just need to know what the feature does, which you guys have kind of talked about at the very beginning of the hour. They also have parallelization now where they can spread instead of doing like a single node execution, then I'll spread it across multiple nodes. So they can do some very high scale of like, all right, you've got a massive transformation. Let's just spread this across multiple machines, and then we'll kind of complete that for you. So all things that have been done in the cloud a long time ago. As other things are being introduced to data flows, that's where, like, for me, it's like the professional level is being treated very well. Like, we're eating very good right now. But as a low code first time user, it may be a little bit more, it's a bigger task. And that for me is like, I would always advocate that I want the background to auto optimize for me. So I would prefer that Microsoft just figure that stuff out. If I don't have enough, if I have 100 rows in a text CSV file, that's on you to turn off staging. I don't care.
Exactly. Yeah. No, exactly right. And I think that's where I'd like maybe a bit more aggressive. And it's also like, yes, I want Microsoft to do this thing, but I'd also like to see kind of like the hit list, right? So there's a lot of these little optimization things that are probably happening, or settings. There's there's the properties panel of that data flow. It feels like there needs to be like a summary a little bit more, hey, here's the settings. Here's all the settings. When you started, it was kind of like this. And then here, after a couple runs, we decided that this is a better way, or we've automatically turned these things off. I think that's helpful. Microsoft should just do that, but there should always be a place where experts can kind of come in and poke at those features and turn them on or off as needed. But again, Microsoft has doing what? Petabytes of data movement with data flows. Like, they should know what's best. Like, there's no, of the data flows that have been built, there's probably nothing new that they haven't already seen or haven't had someone build already. So because of that, Microsoft should be the one pushing like this next round of like optimizations, and that should not be a burden to the user. And I really do think that makes a lot of sense here. One thing I just want to point out here as well, we're talking a lot about options in data loading when it comes to Fabric. There's a nagging point in my mind here around like, there is a lot of users still just using Power BI. So all the things we're talking about these are like data flow Gen 2 features. These are data flow like parallelization. That's data flows Gen 2. Copy job happening behind the scenes, large amount, like that's data flows Gen 2. So there's a lot of these things that we're talking about here also are Fabric only related data flow Gen 2 features. And I was looking around in my tenant the other day, and Tommy, I'm going to poke a bit here for a little bit. Tommy and I found there's a setting inside the admin settings that says, don't allow data flows Gen 1 anymore. You can turn it off. And I was flabbergasted. I was like, what the heck? I don't remember seeing this feature. I don't ever remember seeing it being like listed as a new feature in the new items on the list.
Yeah.
So I don't know when that appeared. I went back to my historical records and looked at every day. It looked like April 5th was like when that feature appeared, but there was no fanfare. There was no announcement. It didn't feel like it was getting stuck into the, hey, look, these are new admin features you can use. And I feel like this was a little bit sneaky to some degree, because all of a sudden now there's a setting that says turn off Dataflow Gen 1. That's a tenant setting, which any users who are potentially building things in Power BI now can't use that Dataflow Gen 1 experience. So that was interesting to me, what was going on there. And it feels like Microsoft is trying to push everyone more towards Fabric and Dataflow Gen 2, which is probably right. But I'm just thinking to myself, like when I look at the Dataflow Gen 1 experience, it's CSV files. It's it's if you set it up correctly, you can actually attach like a storage account, and you can have Dataflow Gen 1 running and then just saving files down to disk, which is the storage account, which it comes out with CSV files. So like all of that experience still exists, and that's just totally different than what we're seeing now in Dataflow. Like to your point, Alex, the whole paradigm has now shifted. And not only are we getting a lot of new options to do tuning and optimizations, but the Dataflow Gen 2 is literally a different animal than it was the first time through.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And the setting likely was at FabCon?
Yeah.
April 5th. Yeah. So that's part of like the save as experience. So if you go into a Dataflow Gen 1, ... ellipsis menu, there'll be a save as Gen 2, kind of a quick upgrade. I'll have a Spandic Link Labs function out there where you can bulk going through all of your data flows to upgrade to a Gen 2 with CI/CD support. So very explicit there. A lot of the things are to address like the Gen 1 challenges. There is different execution and behind the scenes as well. The Gen 1 and Gen 2 architectures are vastly different, as we've talked about. Like, hey, this is writing out to CSV. This is writing out to a binary Parquet file with V order and, lake houses, warehouse, etc. The part for me, of course, is like, if you have a very large Dataflow Gen 1 estate, like now is the time to start deciding like, oh, we've been looking for security support for the Dataflow or at an object level or a row level security of the data in a Dataflow. That's what warehouse is for. Like that's what you want to solve your problem. Here is the solution now. So start looking at it as the ELTL tool. The other aspects here, of course, are just like, I want CI/CD support. Hey, Gen 2 has kind of got you covered there. VNet data gateways only exist for Gen 2. They don't support for Gen 1. If you go out in any of the docs for like migrations of Gen 1 to Gen 2, I authored both that and the scenarios doc. So I was very much like, if I was a functional consultant, what is my go or no-go matrix to say, now is the time that we should start investing in Gen 2? Or if I'm looking at the scenarios of like, do I go lakehouse, warehouse? All right, well, here's the requirements. What do you want? Well, I want to share tables across workspaces like I did in Gen 1 with linked tables. Okay, so you want a shortcut. It's like, oh, all right. I still get the thing. I just didn't know what it was called now in Fabric. They're called shortcuts. Share tables across lake houses. So like there are so many amazing new things, but I do agree that it's the level of investment and rework that you should now be evaluating. Please don't just copy and paste the code and expect like for like comparisons, which I see everyone on LinkedIn, Reddit, Blue Sky, wherever else. They're like, Gen 1 is faster than Gen 2. And like, is it though?
And I would agree with you on that one too. I think you're right about that one very much so. It's very, people could potentially cherry pick or think they're cherry picking a good scenario, but in reality, it's actually not playing to its strengths as much anymore.
But now it's the time investment, right?
Right.
Yes. Yeah, true.
And it's the deception of being too easy. Real quickly, Mike, when we were talking about the hidden setting, Alex, you'll appreciate this. It kind of felt like when the Cubs or the Yankees designate someone for assignment on a Sunday night on a tweet. Like, by the way, Devin Williams is no longer, he's gone. He's gone. It's Sunday night at midnight. By the way, so that's what it feels like. Mike, in baseball, you can get rid of someone in a very not illegal way, but they do it very under the hood, and that's what we're doing.
They've had some guys who were just like about to step on the mound, and you're just like,
oh yeah.
They got traded an hour ago.
We got traded for cash, which is the worst one. Or it's like, but it's almost the deception with data flows that it's like the two sides of the coin. I think we're getting to the point, or we're finding the deception of it being too easy. And I think because, I mean, you have, unlike Python or unlike the notebook where there is a user interface, but a lot of things you got to do a little research on, or you ask ChatGPT or AI, which is going to find you the most efficient way for what you've asked it to do. You know, like if I want to group by and do a subindex or whatever it may be, well, ChatGPT is not going to find you just any random path. It's going to do the one that obviously works. But with data flows and Power Query in general, it has all of these options available to me, and there's no restrictions for the user, whether or not you're advanced or just starting out.
Yep.
And a lot of things that worked in Power BI desktop that run blazingly fast or just worked. Maybe they weren't super fast or efficient, but they worked great. And guess what? It worked great in the service and it worked great on my desktop. Yeah, it may take 20 minutes, but you know what? It was never a hindrance. Those same patterns in Data Flows Gen 2 can become a hindrance because, like to your point, it's really doing something different. Even if the looks the same, it smells the same, but it's not the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest difference that I'm discovering today is, yeah, it does the same transformations, but unlike any other iteration of Power Query, it's really attempting to be something else. But again, and I don't want to say my hiccup with this is, but yet we have the same giant user interface of options available to me. So to me, even it's like, oh, I guess I can do all of these and none of these will hurt. And I think that's the hard thing to really kind of navigate through.
Aspirationally, I believe that the engine should just do it for you. If you want to create crazy spaghetti code, then that's the way that your mind mentally maps. Like, you know, I could sit here and be like, well, you need to break it out and you need to do a query reference. You need to have this other query that does this. Here's my M. You go figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, that is the ideal world for me, aspirational.
Oh, I like that.
And there's no reason why I couldn't, right? Like, hey, you have enough runtimes. You can kind of figure this out based on like data sources and like based on transformations, etc. Like steps 1 through 6 fold, steps 7 through 8 don't. Like you figure out how to break it apart to make it run efficiently.
I like that.
Yeah, and the things for me is like I just look back to like the Excel users in like my own days. In Dataflow Gen 2, there's up to a 50 query limit. So again, that's like why I like things of like, well, if I want 51 or 52 queries, it's like, well, I'm going to go yell at Microsoft. And it's like, well, why? Like, think about your problem differently. Spread things out. Use 2 data flows. Use 3 data flows. Based on source, based on update method, based on does it fold or not fold. There's so many different ways to kind of think about the problem. But I do think of every Power Query user that's in Excel right now. I would just love for them to copy and paste the code into the cloud and have it execute. Yeah. 9 times out of 10, everyone that's using Excel is like, I wish there was a scheduler for me to optimize and run this. If it's Power Automate, if there was Power Automate, hey, that'd be amazing. If not, like use Dataflow Gen 2. Cloud schedule refreshes, get your data ready, throw it into a database. In Power Query now, if you've been in Excel, like the latest build, it has get data from Fabric. You now start selecting Fabric items. So keep people in Excel if that's where they want to be. If you want to build pivot tables, like there's so many amazing things we could do. Thinking about our Excel users, they just want to copy and paste their code. That's it. Yeah. They don't want to learn Dataflow Gen 2. And that's just me being honest. Power BI users, they've been around Gen 1 for a while. They kind of understand like this enhanced compute engine stuff. If they have access to PPU or kind of a premium. I didn't get asked about Fabric per users, so thank you guys.
Till next time.
I'll remember that.
That'll be a good topic too. But there's just so many great opportunities, I think, for people to take a step back and be like, what is it we want to accomplish with like a like for like comparison or a first run experience? Just knowing that the generations are not the same underneath the hood.
It's interesting that you bring up the Excel space of things, because I think that's one area of Power BI that has been continually the weakest since day one. It's this like Excel table-like experience that you can use. It seamlessly integrates with like the table experience and going to like Lakehouse or M-Code. It's not quite, the vision of that has never really kind of come to where I think it should be polished on at this point. And I really do feel like there's a missing visual inside Power BI desktop that is like the table filter, table slicer, right? It should be something that I'm going to go there again, Tommy. Tommy hates it because I keep going to it.
Here we go.
But I'm going to step back from that. I'm not going to push that too hard. But what I will push on though is if we look at the size of audiences, I know that the Excel, I don't remember where I heard it, but I'm guessing Excel scale is huge. Like the amount of users, and compared to Power BI, we're talking, Power BI is 30 million monthly active users. I think Excel is in the 800 to 700 million monthly active users, maybe even higher than that.
Yeah.
But that's the scale of that size is like, if we can bring more of that audience over and start leveraging more of the ease that we're getting everywhere else, like why isn't there a lift your Excel Power Query right into Fabric and just have full Excel super tightly integrated with like even just table view, like a single object inside the Fabric workspace that is like the same thing as tables inside Excel, like the exact same thing, but just really, really polished and very feature rich compared to the original one. So that would be one place where I'd like to see some investment there, because I think that bringing that user audience over would be very useful for the Fabric and the Power BI space as well.
Instead of close and load to, we could do close and load to a data flow.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That'd be amazing. Or just start taking. I mean, even just in Excel, just start picking tables. Like just make the tables that exist. These tables in this Excel file just immediately go to lakes or whatever. Yeah. I don't know what you do with them, but it's something there that's just kind of like it immediately makes it easy to get it landed somewhere else. That would be immensely useful for people. And then I could open up again, do the iframe thing, right? Slap in an Excel document, make it just iframe out. Here we go. This full Excel right inside Power BI and Fabric. And then boom, when you're done, I'm going to mark these tables as full copies, just push them right into the lakehouse. Done. And then I can pick them up from everywhere else. So I think there's some opportunity for some tighter integration between those two experiences to make it a bit more seamless moving forward. All right. We are fully at time. This has been an hour of conversation around Power Query, just a lot of like efficiency, optimization, patterns that we're seeing here, the old stuff, Gen 1 versus Gen 2. Really appreciate the conversation. This is super rich. Alex, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you being here on the podcast. It's been super fun. For you users who are listening, thank you for hanging out with us. I hope you enjoy this episode. Our only ask for you is, would you mind just letting somebody else know we're talking about Power Query in depth, in detail, with the expert himself, the guy who writes the documentation on the Microsoft site. So I don't think you get anyone who's more knowledgeable about Power Query than Alex. So we're super thrilled to have you here. Please share this with somebody else and let them know this was awesomely valuable. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. And share with a friend, since we do this for free. You like what Alex talked about? You want him to talk with us again? Or do you have a question, idea, or topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tip/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all of Power BI Tips social media channels.
Thank you all so much and appreciate your time. We'll see you next time.